Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. The show is designed to give you solutions to your day-to-day management and leadership problems. It's hosted by Matthew Haddock, a frontline manager and leader with over 25 years of experience. If you're ready, then let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Manager Matt podcast show. I do hope you are well and getting results through your team. My name's Matt Haddock, and as you know, I'm a leader and manager with over 25 years of experience. I'd like to talk around how we can improve our clarity as leaders today. So when we look about leading with clarity, sometimes we lose ourselves. Sometimes we get confused around what we're there to do. What is our purpose as leaders and managers? And I've gone through a few podcasts, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find my podcast wherever you get your normal podcasts from, if that's Spotify or if that's Heart or if that's Apple, that's up to you. But if you're listening as normal, you'll know that a lot of my content is around how we can be honest as leaders, how we can improve our leadership skills, how we can integrate management and make sure we get results. And a lot of that is around being supportive and making sure people do what they have to do day in, day out, but without having the big stick or whip or whatever floats your boat behind you. Well, what I want to do today is talk a little bit around how, as managers, we are inbred in the facts that we need to be empathetic, we need to be collaborative, we need to empower people. But sometimes you just need to be clear, firm, and more direct. Why is that? Well, sometimes it's the right move because of a number of issues, and let me break that down. Firstly, when you bring direct action to people, it's around getting something done, getting a results. Being direct works best when you need to be clear. You need to make sure that the people are comfortable that you are that person. You know, if your team is confused about priorities, if you've got missing deadlines as a team and missing service level, things like that, you know, you're going in that wrong direction, then being a more direct manager is the right way to do. Sometimes being indirect actually can slow down everything at that point. So make sure direct leadership cuts through that ambiguity. It answers things like what needs to happen, when do we need to get a response, when is it due by, that's what it's about. And in high pressure situations, tight deadlines, crises or performance issues, directness isn't just helpful, it can be a necessity. Because if you're not direct and you allow it to drift, then things go wrong pretty bad. Now, people will put up with some things not working if you can show them the path to an empowered workforce that delivers. But when it's high pressure, and definitely when it's in a crisis, you need to make sure that you are direct to get things done. What about those long-term effects? So second point, what about the long-term effects? What happens when you are direct? Well, there is that leadership needs to make sure that you're using it in the right way. So short-term directness, you know, that gets you results. But long-term, well, it depends how you do it. You know, if you are clear with respect to people, you know, that can build trust. You know, if you direct but you're very disrespectful, then that can damage morale, you know. And of course that all important empowerment of your teams to do things when you're not there, when you're not giving directions. If you want to be a 24-hour 7 days a week leader, then yes, direct is fine. Let people have no empowerment of themselves and just get on with it. You don't have to be too sort of wishy-washy, you just tell them what to do and they get on with it. But great leaders are direct about things like expectations. They're direct when it comes to feedback. And of course, they're direct when it comes to those consequences that can happen when things go wrong. But they're still fair, they're still consistent, and of course, beyond anything, they're still human. So make sure if you are going to be direct, you're looking at the fact that you need to be respectful but clear, and watch that you don't go too disrespectful, and of course, cut everyone's legs out from underneath them. When it comes to the type of work directness works best at, I get asked that a lot. Well, when should I be direct, Matt? When is that direction, you know, really needs to be given? Well, of course, yeah, some environments actually depend on it. Let's think about it. Direct leadership works especially well in operations and execution of those heavy roles. You know, when you really need to get things done, you need someone who's going to drop onto the shop floor or into the call centre and make decisions and push things forward when there's a crisis. Crisis management, people will look for leaders to take responsibility, take hold of the situation and make sure they're getting the results they need. Early stage of some teams, and of course when you've got new employees, you have to be more direct. You can't assume that people are just going to know how to do something. We don't have a crystal ball, and reading a manual isn't going to be the way you're going to teach your team. So you're going to have to be direct. You're going to have to give people those ideas directly straight to them. This is what I expect you to do at this time. This is how it works. Roles with clear, measurable outcomes can definitely be directed. If you think of the sort of your traditional assembly line, very much this gets built at this point, this is done at this point. That can be very direct. You don't need a lot of autonomy in the person. That doesn't mean you don't listen to people. It definitely means you listen to people because you've got to give them the chance to improve where they're working and make sure that whatever they're doing has their own input. If not, you're just employing machines. And machines will do what they're told to do. They'll follow their programming, but you won't get the best out of them. They won't find a better way on their own. Well, not at the moment, but let's see how that goes. And of course, in situations where people benefit from the idea of being speed and structure, the idea of having direct instructions, that's when it works really well. When you're giving directions in those situations. Where it doesn't work as well, of course, when you're looking at more creative or exploratory or highly autonomous work, that's very difficult. If you've got a team that's completely remote, and some people do now, whatever the benefits and the drawbacks of that are, that's the nature of the work, you cannot be there directing them. You're not going to be ringing them every 2 minutes saying, have you done X, Y, and Z? You'll be laying out expectations. You'll be telling them what you expect people to deliver, and then you're measuring them on their delivery. And that's where it can be less easy to have direct working, as in a direct work relationship with those people, because at that point, you're giving them the autonomy to make things happen. Where does it fail? We all know if, sometimes you're in those positions. Do you like your boss being too direct at certain times? Do you get, annoyed by that? Do you not do your best work? Well, that's exactly what can happen. Direct leadership can fail and when it becomes consistently all the time. So if you're always doing it in any situation, when it's very one-dimensional, that's where it fails to hit. And of course, when, you become emotionally unaware of what you're doing. If you're walking in somewhere and these are skilled, highly trained people who know their job and you're telling them what to do all the time without giving them the chance to have their input, then people will naturally turn off. And of course, where you will have failures, it won't work. You've got to make sure that you allow people to speak up, you allow people to have an input. Of course, if it has to be done quickly, if the building's on fire, you don't want to debate about which exit you go through. You go, don't you? Every interaction, if it's blunt and task force, can cause problems. People stop speaking up if you're too blunt and too direct all the time. The creativity of those people, if they are in creativity roles, will drop. I'll just do what I need to do. People will just follow the clock. I'll come at this time, I'll go at this time. I'll log on at this time, I'll leave at this time. I'm just a number, I'm just a cog in the machine. Engagement falls when you use it all the time. And it also fails when leaderships confuse being direct with being right. As a leader and a manager, you're not going to be right all the time. In fact, sometimes you're lucky if you're right 50% of the time. But you've got a team around you. Those are the teams that make those decisions. Those are the teams that make things happen. So that's where you're going to get the benefits from. So if you're completely direct and always doing that, then you think you're right all the time. People will stop making decisions. What will happen? You'll get a phone call in the middle of the night about the smallest thing. That's not going to add value to you. Just because you're clear doesn't mean that you're correct. You shoot down people's input, then obviously that's the fastest way for people to make bad decisions, or even worse, making no decisions. So let's work on to, the other side of this. So drawbacks of it, we've just talked around how it fails, but the drawbacks are obviously quite honest and open when you talk about when these fails. You'll know yourself if you're too direct or you work for a manager who is too direct, then you will end up with it will lead to low psychological safety. We all know that you want to be in a safe psychological place when you're at work. Dependency on the leaders. I've just mentioned the phone call in the middle of the night. That can happen all the time. And it's so frustrating, especially if you don't get it. If you're a manager who is quite unaware of the way that they've been acting, then you're going to get really frustrated when people keep coming up to you and asking you very basic questions. You're thinking, do these people not understand what's going on? Are they dim? Why can't they make these decisions? But of course, you have reduced their initiatives by the way you've acted. Now, surprise, surprise, that means you get more things to direct, less input from the person, more things to direct, and that cycle keeps going down. And in a lot of teams, you will see people leaving. Because if you're an intelligent person who's been in a business and knows their things, or a highly skilled individual, and you're being almost belittled by a person giving you direct A, B, C instructions, then they're going to go. People may comply for a while, but they're not committing. They're just going through it because they get paid. I'm just here for the paycheck. I'm talking to someone who was working with a very toxic boss, who was very direct, thought they knew everywhere, and they were like, I'm just here for the paycheck. I am just staying until my retirement date comes up. I'm not bothered about looking. I can just about manage this fella. I'm just going to wait till the end. What an awful way of work. And of course, you got less out of that person. He didn't do the work that you wanted him to do. He was definitely just a drag, an anchor for everyone else. The one with the sarcastic comments, the one who wasn't a team player, as we call them. That wasn't anything about it. It was the fact that he was being directed constantly. Very skillful person, very technical. But of course, if you get that, you're going to get turned off. So what do the experts say about this? I'm all for theory. So what do they say about it? Most leadership experts actually do not recommend too much directness. We know that, but there's a balance. And of course, that's where you get the grey areas. The leadership experts actually, they recommend directness when there's a need for it. Modern leadership thinks of things like clear expectations, honest feedback, fast decision making when needed. Those are all traits of someone who does to be direct. So there is a direct part of that. But they also look at things like coaching and listening, empowering people to do things, make decisions, make them the fact that the area is safe for them to make decisions. I like my managers to make decisions. If it fails, well, sometimes it fails, but you can get better from that. You learn from that. You move forward. That coaching style, leaders now want to do it. It's a tool. The directness is in your toolbox, but most of the time it's around collaborating, getting people to switch on between, whatever their tasks they're doing. Now, of course, that can be making sure they've got a switch between sometimes being directive, sometimes being collaborating, sometimes it's coaching, sometimes it's a mix of all of it, and it can be all of it in the same day. I don't think there's any prescriptive theory that says you must do that. There's plenty of books out there, there's plenty of podcasts out there. You're listening to one now, or watching one now, that's about this. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's it, that's the one way. I'll read a book and it's the only way. It changes, it adapts, so be aware of that. Some of the studies to support that, if you go and have a look, there's clarity and reducing cognitive load. There's a book on task orientation leadership that can improve performance. There's, timely feedback. That's the books you'll see. Those are the titles. I won't go into any particular authors, but if you go out there and put those search engines in to your search engine, you'll get that psychological safety versus clear direction. Most of them are in there. If you have a look around, there's plenty of good podcasts out there, not just about management, but about how leadership styles work. So have a think about doing that. Now, what we've talked about today, let's just boil it down. What is it about? Look, sometimes you need to be direct as a leader. When do you use it? When you need to make sure the clarity isn't there, that you need to be direct and clear. When your stakes are high and things are going pretty bad, you need to be direct. If your performance is slipping, I'm not talking a blip, we're talking slipping, you've got to get hold of it. You've got to seize that day and make it happen. And of course, when speed matters, if there's a crisis, place is burning, there's a flood coming, we don't want a debate, we don't want a coaching session, we want decisions, you need someone leading. So those are definitely things. But it's a balance. It's a balance about empathy. It's a balance about listening. And of course, building trust, because great leaders isn't about choosing one style. It's about knowing which style works best in the moment. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. I do hope you've enjoyed the show. If you do get a chance, send me some feedback. You can put it in the comments wherever you get your podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, share it with others who might like it. Pass it on to others, because the message is out there. Be a better leader will make your day better, will make your business better, and will make sure the people around you really appreciate it. Well, that's it for Manager Matt this week. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Goodbye.
Thank Thank you so much for listening to this Manager Matt podcast. We hope you found it interesting, helpful and actionable. One last thing, please leave a quick review on iTunes or with your podcast provider, as it helps to spread the word of Manager Matt. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you did like anything in particular, send an email to managermattpodcast@gmail.com or visit managermatt.co.uk for more content. Feedback is a gift, so let's keep giving. See you next week.